for that. For the dish clanging and the... Okay, what's up, everybody? My name's Indy, and this is Indie Game Business. The gentleman I have sitting right next to me, that's Mr. Jay Powell from Powell Group Consulting. And over here on the other end, we have Elena. How do you say your last name?
Lobova.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And what are we talking about today, Jay?
Biz dev, networking, and marketing. All that, and whatever else we come up with in the meantime. So, you know how the show goes.
Yep.
So, Elena, welcome to Indie Game Business. I appreciate you are taking some time to come out and chat with us today. I met Elena in Poland at the game industry conference a few months ago, and so we got to talking, and she's got a ridiculously awesome background, and she's founded Achievers Hub, which is a great resource, especially for Eastern European developers on the indie side. And so we'll get into all of that, but first and foremost, Elena, tell us how you got into the industry and walk us through what you've done up to this point.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm really honored to be here on your podcast. And yeah, the story about how I got to the industry is actually quite funny, because I've been in the industry since the very beginning. This is the only industry in. Well, probably I'll start from my background. I was born and raised in a small Ukrainian industrial city called Lobova in the east of Ukraine. It's unfortunately now notorious because of the war conflict with Russia, but back then, 30 years ago, it was a nice, peaceful city, and this is where I got a degree in computer science. I'm a master of computer science. I always liked programming, computers, but also I always liked communications, talking to people, public appearances. That's why, being in university, I was always involved in some extra activities, and one of these activities, International Students Nonprofit. It's called ISEC. Maybe some of you who listen to us know this organization. Our main goal was to provide opportunities for youth to explore and develop their leadership potential. So make different social projects, cultural exchange between different countries. And in this organization, I was responsible for fundraising. I was responsible for securing some sponsorships and partnerships so we could make these projects happen. And this is how I met a young entrepreneur back in my city. He was just a couple years older than me, but he was already a founder of a small game development company called iLogos. And I involved them as the sponsors to one of our projects because they were actively looking for new employees, and we helped them find some new employees among the students we worked with. Everybody was happy with this partnership, but it was not the end of our story, because in a couple months, this founder of the company, he just approached me and he, hey, you're still a student, yeah, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm completing my master's in a couple months. And he said, do you have any plans on what to do next? I didn't know. I really didn't know back then. I was considering different options for my future, but I had nothing planned 100%. So he basically offered me to join his small, back then, team of 30 people and help him grow the team. And I agreed. And this is how my very first paid job was COO, Chief Operational Officer. I became a COO at the age of 21. Well, I was a Chief Operational Officer without an operational office back then. It was just me and our founder and developers and artists. But we were very ambitious, and we will grow the company quite fast. It was a crazy period. This is how I got into games, and I never actually left the industry since then.
So after you left iLogos, you founded Achievers Hub. So tell us a little bit about that and why you did it, because you and I are very much on the same page with the need, but I want to hear why you did it and how it's going and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay, yeah, well, actually, I'll probably also mention that I spent 6 years at iLogos, quite a long period of time, and this company was an outsourcing game development company, which made a lot of sense because we were in Ukraine and we had a lot of talent, but the quite quite low, so our prices were very affordable for our buyers, and but at some point I realized that outsourcing is not something that fulfills my ambition. I didn't want to be a CEO of an outsourcing company for my entire life. I wanted to do something more meaningful. I wanted to more difference in the industry. And after I left iLogos, I spent some time just reflecting on what to do next. I organized a couple conferences, consulted some companies, but I wasn't sure what would be my next step. And during this period, I met a lot of amazing, talented indie developers who had amazing games. But they asked me such a simple questions, in my opinion. But for them, it was like an entire different universe, a universe of business development, networking, publishers, and so on. They knew that I had pitching experience before, negotiation experience, that I quite a big network, so they just asked me for help, and I started helping them just because I liked them, I liked what they were doing, and I really thought that their games deserved. And this is how the idea of Achievers Hub naturally evolved. It's not something that came to my mind overnight and I woke up with a brilliant idea. I just started as a consultant. I was doing everything for free, and then I decided why not to make a business out of it.
Something badass. You want something badass.
It's amazing
I'm
how
happy that you're here, because
I've done the very same thing. I've sat down and helped people for free and offered advice, and then that moment when you realize, oh, wait a second,
let's see it.
I can actually make money doing this and turn this into a job. And that's why we started this show. It's because I had that realization several years ago that we had been doing, my company had been doing this for so long that we had knowledge that we assumed everyone else had.
It fixed the snarl, so
exactly the same.
Yeah, then it's just a matter of, okay, how do I get it out there, and what do I do to pay the bills, in the meantime? So,
you prick.
What do you do? What does Achievers Hub do? And if someone wants to get involved, obviously, how do they submit? But walk us through what you've done now to turn this passion into something that actually pays the bills.
ISO coming the year.
Okay, well, actually, Achievers Hub helps developers. Yeah, they submit the games through our website. We select the most promising titles, and then we help them get connected to investors, publishers, mentors, someone who can give them business and product advice, and who can guide them their games better. And at the end of the day, we make money out of the deals. When developers sign a deal with a publisher or with an investor, we get a small revenue share in the project. We're actually working on additional business models now. We're gonna have more than that soon, but during these 2 years, we only get money out of deals, and also sometimes we did some side events. This was also one of the things we did, and we will continue doing this. We also want to help developers meet publishers offline sometimes if it's possible. Time to time, we do small events, usually focused on something in particular. For example, in June this year still, we organized a hyper-casual game jam in Kiev, and we brought a lot of publishers from all around the world, and in front of developers, let developers develop hyper-casual games, and as publishers, they guided them, and at the end, they were able to listen to the pitches and find some nice games, and actually, like, some of them are, as far as I know, some of them now work. That's the best thing for me to know that something happens out of these introductions.
So what's the most common mistake that you see when it comes to developers, either getting ready to or actually pitching their projects to publishers?
Okay, well, probably the most common and the biggest mistake is that sometimes developers get overconfident in their game. And on one hand, I understand that this game is like a child to them, and they love this game. But they just this confidence, it just blinds them. And sometimes they are not sensitive to. They're very sensitive to critics. They cannot process feedback. And also one of the biggest mistakes that developers they're just making a game they want to make and don't even think about how to make this game attractive to publishers, and they sometimes don't even think about business part of things at all. And well, I understand that in our industry, product is the king, and if you develop a shitty game, nothing gonna help you get the publishing. If you make a good game, it's just half of the way. You're just half of the way there. You also need to how to present this game in the right way, and how to negotiate with publishers, how to pitch the project, and how to make your game visible.
And so what are the most basic steps? Because, yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that we teach too. It's like you got to have some thick skin to be able to do this, because people are going to tell you things you don't want to hear. Not everybody loves your game.
That's true.
What's the most basic way that you can see? I mean, other than you're developing that thick skin, but when developers are starting to pitch to publishers, what are some of the most basic things that they can do to get ready for that step before they go and do it?
Okay. Well, first, I want to go a little bit backwards before even pitching the game to the publisher. It's also important for a team to realize that they actually need a publisher, because there are some teams that are, again, very confident in themselves, overconfident, and they don't even realize that they need a publisher and why they need a publisher. So first, probably the team should start with checking out different opportunities of what they can get from a publisher, what do they really need from a publisher, and then if they finally realize that they do need a publisher, they want to pitch a game to a publisher, I know that there are many developers who are quite shy, and they are maybe not very good public speakers, but they can just start pitching the games to each other at, for example, developers meet. Even here in Ukraine, we have meetups for developers, and I know that there are a lot of indie developers meetups around the world where developers can just meet, share, and maybe the game to each other, participate in some pitching competition, just try it on people you feel more comfortable with before pitching it in front of investors, publishers, and the other serious business guys that developers are usually afraid of. So this is the first step, and for some developers it's easier to the game in writing not in person. And sometimes it's not even possible to beat the game in person because developers might be, for example, they might develop their little game in a small city, let's say in Ukraine or Russia or Belarus, and they don't have means to travel and attend the conference. So it also makes sense to check how to build your pitch deck and what to include in a pitch deck and what not include in the pitch deck, and what should the first email and how to attract the attention of publishers.
So, and for those of you out there who are watching, we actually have an infographic that we use at the Powell Group to show you exactly what you need to have in that pitch deck. And so we'll share that shortly when I can pull the link up. But, you know, you brought up a good point in you may be in a small town where you don't have access to, you know, the bigger conferences and things like that. And recently on the Discord server, you know, one of the teams even mentioned, I mean, he doesn't live in a small town, he lives in Boston. And you know, the concern that he had now was that PAX has gotten so expensive that it's actually priced out of the range of indie teams. So how does the networking aspect of this factor into, you know, the biz dev and all those other things that indie devs need to be doing? How can they go and effectively network and meet publishers if they do live in that small town?
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. First, of course, I mean, it's good when there are some local meetups, but as I always say, if you're an indie developer and there is no meetup in your town, just organize one. It's usually quite easy to do, and if you don't know how to do it, reach out to someone who organizes these meetups in the other city. Maybe they can help you somehow, guide you, and tell you what you should do. And like this is one of the ways they can do it. Also, there are online events. For example, I know that you guys also have online pitching, and like this is the way also to beat the game. And if the developers don't have, if for example they live in a big city or they can't travel to the city but they cannot afford a ticket, there are other opportunities to get there. For example, volunteering. I know many developers who cannot who cannot afford a ticket, let's say to GDC because it's crazy expensive, but like they can apply as a volunteer, work, help organize a little bit, and get to the conference. By the way, volunteering at the I actually think that this is a great, powerful networking tool because this allows you to get in touch with conference organizers who are usually quite good networkers. And if you want to widen your network, it's good to keep close to those whose network is already quite. Also, if you're volunteering at the event, you can be somehow get to know speakers, other attendees, and maybe sponsors. And like, I mean, I really love working, and I actually think that every connection matters, even if now you don't know how you what you can get or what you can give to this person that you met. You never know what will happen in the future. Like over this 8 years I spent in games industry, I met a bunch of people, and some of the connections they got really useful in like 4 or 5 years, and I was able to help someone or someone was able to help me when we were already connected for quite a while, changed some jobs, cities, and so on.
And that's a very good point, because it's one of the things that we've always told people as well. Yes, our industry is big. You know, there's thousands, tens of thousands of companies in it, but it's a small industry in the fact that it doesn't take very many phone calls or emails to find out, you know, about someone. And so that person that you may meet at a show who's a QA tester right now, in 2 years could be a producer and a publisher that you need access to.
Yeah.
And so, it's not only about that networking, but it's about not being a dick and don't burn bridges, because you never know. I mean, it's absolutely crazy how fast people can come up through this industry. You can't look at everybody as saying, okay, well, you're no use to me right now. It is. I mean, like you said, every single connection matters, and that's
Right.
a very good point. So, to rewind just a little bit, you spoke in an interview a couple of years ago when you were founding it. You talked about how developers are concerned about pitching and networking, but they need to also focus on how do they make their game attractive to publishers or to marketing teams and that sort of stuff. What are some of the basic things that they can do to make their game more attractive?
Okay, well, first of all, they should need who to pitch this game to. Do some, before pitching the games, do some homework and check what kind of publishers would be probably interested in their games, because publishers are different, they have different portfolios, and if you know the portfolio of the publisher well, and you can say that, hey, look at my game, I think it would fit your portfolio well, and it really fits more or less, it's always good. Also, developers should understand their market, their niche, their genre, understand who are their target audience. There was a funny situation that actually happened in my life when I asked a developer who was making some bizarre game what was the target audience for the game, and the developer replied, owners of so yeah.
Wait, how did you cut out there? Owners of what?
Mobile phones.
Oh God.
Yeah, so this is a real story from real life. Yeah, so you probably should know a little bit more about your audience and study the market, know your competitors, and also when developers say that we don't have any competitor, it also sounds not very good to publishers, because you might not have direct competitors, but you probably have some similar games, and if you have no idea about you have no projections on how this game gonna earn money, it's not attractive at all. And if you don't know how much money you need, also there are some development teams that when you ask them about budget, they say, hey, well, we can adjust budget to your needs, give us just whatever you can give us. And they think that they're being flexible, but in reality it looks like they just don't know what they're building. They don't know about the project, they don't have a roadmap probably, so they just want to take as much money as they can and then do what they can for this money, which is not good. Publishers should understand. Developers know where they had it. They have a roadmap. They have an understanding of the market. They have an understanding how they fit into this market and fit in this portfolio. Or they might not. The game might look exactly the way it will look at during its launch. It's fine. It's okay. Some developers need more polishing. Sometimes art looks a little bit different, but at least also you have to have something to show. And I also encourage developers to send short gameplay video along with the build, so publishers can check the video first and then go to the. If they like the video, it's a respect to their time, so they don't spend much time downloading your build if they don't like your gameplay video. yeah, which also means that your gameplay video should look great. It should highlight the strengths of the game. It should grab attention. It shouldn't be the very beginning of the game, like tutorial part. It should be something where all the fun. Yeah, and maybe the same. Yeah.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people, when they put these demos or these videos together, they do it from the beginning. And so,
Yeah.
when we sit down and we look at it, either me as the consultant or publishers, it's like we have to sit through 5 minutes of tutorial and intro and splash screens before we ever see the game.
Right.
You want to show the coolest and the most exciting parts of it, because you really have a matter of minutes of this person's time before they're going to either completely lose interest or they're going to go to something else. It is important to put the most exciting stuff up there first.
Yeah, and even if you have a long game, you can just send the link with a timestamp to what you want to show. And also this also can be true about the sometimes it makes sense to make a vertical slice at the first impression of your game, not to ask publisher to progress to the level 40 when all the fun starts. They would probably abandon your game in the first 5. Yeah. It might take a lot of time to say yes, but it usually takes just a few seconds to say no.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Publishers are always looking for a reason to say no. Andy, we got a question.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to read. All right. Nightwolf says, do you have to pay to volunteer, or do you get paid as a volunteer? I mean, volunteer is somebody that just does something for free, right? Are you allowed to pitch a game as a volunteer or just network? Volunteer just feels strange in this sense.
It depends on the country. If you apply the volunteer, you work 1 or 2 days and you have 1 or 2 days free time for yourself. So this is your gratitude. They do not pay volunteers. As a gratitude to you, they give you a ticket to the event. They give you 1 or 2, 3 days, depending on how long is the conference. And during these 3 days, of course, do whatever you want. But of course, if you're working at, for example, at registration point and there is a publisher who wants to grab their page, it's better not to pitch the game to them as a volunteer. When you're on your duty, you of course shouldn't pitch it, but when you have free time, and all volunteers have free time, nobody uses them day in and day out, like all around the clock. You can of course do what you want and enjoy.
All right, cutting out a lot.
Yeah, we are cutting out a lot.
Sorry, I don't know what that.
It's like your Wi-Fi is slowing down a little bit. So yeah, I mean, you got a point. When you're volunteering, you don't want to sign someone into the conference and give them their badge and then hand them a demo at the same time. But that's the way I know Game Daily Connect works. Is you volunteer 1 day of the conference and then you get a pass to go to the rest of the conference on your own. And I think GDC is something very similar.
Yeah, I think most of the conference do the same. Even if it's like a 2-day event, they usually only use volunteers who are on day 1 or day 2, and you have 1 free day at least.
So when we're looking at a lot of these developers, the majority of the ones that come to us, and I'm assuming the same is true for the ones that come to you at the Achievers Hub, they're either early stage or they're mid stage. And by mid stage, I mean they've either done some games as a studio or they've done enough games as individuals to realize they need help on the business and marketing side. What steps do those developers need to take or need to go through early on and in that intermediate stage to help fuel their growth?
Okay, well, it's really important for developers to think about the business side game from the early stages and to start thinking about how they're gonna pitch the game to publishers early on. Like we have mentors who help us develop, and these mentors usually have a background in publishing, in business, sometimes in film, so they can look at these games and provide some feedback on how attractive the game looks for publishers at this stage. So it's very important to ask for feedback from the early stages, and even if you have just a very concept, I encourage everyone to go to the conferences if they can, and or talk to as many people with experience as they can, and show the game and ask how they like. Because it's easier to change something on the early stage than to change something later on. And I have a story. I have the experience of helping developers who has been traveling to the conferences since very early stage, first playable, and I saw how their games was changed depending on the feedback they got, and the publishers at this event, they also could see how this team can implement the feedback they give, and it's very good skill for the team to show how they can work feedback. So there is nothing bad in showing game publishers early. Nothing bad happen. You just the earlier you get the feedback, the earlier you can implement the feedback, the better for you. Yeah.
I had a question that came out of that, and now I've already forgotten it.
It happens, yeah.
My brain went sideways there. So, growing that company is obviously vitally important. And so when you start, you mentioned when you started at iLogos, it was very small. By the time you left, it was 300 and some people. So
yeah,
what was the secret to that growth? I mean, what did you do along the ways? Because there's a lot of studios out there that are in the same place that iLogos was back then, where they're trying to get one or two contract development gigs going.
Yeah.
What were some of the strategies and that whole little secret sauce to growing, that company and working with people like Rovio and some of these giant studios that you worked with?
Yeah, well, when I think about it, sometimes I think that we were just in the right place, in the right time. Because when we started the company, when Maxim started the company in 2006, and then I joined the company in 2011, and we started working actively on games, because before that the company was just an outsourcing company for different kind of IT. In 2010, 2011, I started focusing on games. Back then there were not that many game development companies in Ukraine in general, and especially in our city, Lugansk. There were almost no opportunities for developers to work in the games industry. But on the other hand, we had two big universities who also from these universities, there was a bunch of developers, engineers who graduated from these universities every year, and many liked games. Many of them wanted to work in the games industry. Not many companies could provide this. So on one hand, I believe it was quite easy for us to hire people, and we had people to choose from, so we could really build a nice team. And on the other hand, the cost of living, as I already mentioned, Ukraine is relatively small, low, comparing to Western Europe and comparing to North America. So it made sense for these big companies to work with us, because we could provide, on one hand, high quality services, on the other hand, for for a relatively low price. And but we were not the only, of course, we were not the only game development outsourcing company in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe, but somehow we grew up so fast. I think maybe because we working with Western companies quite early, and we started adapting a way how Western companies like the way they made their own business, because in Ukraine and in other Russian-speaking post-USSR countries, business approaches are slightly different, and sometimes it's quite hard to work with Eastern European company, with Russian-speaking company, the companies from abroad, because there is a slightly different mentality, different approaches. Some of them, they don't even speak English good enough to conduct negotiations, and we started working, we really wanted to work with more Western companies and also companies from all around the world. So we started expanding our geography, and we tried to get the best practices out of working with this company and implement it internally, so we could speak the same language with this company. And so it was important for us always to be flexible and to try to adapt the culture, if I can say, business culture of our clients. And I believe this was one of the ways why we succeeded. Quite a strong top management team. When I became a CEO in 2015, probably the best thing that we had dialogues, and the thing that I'm mostly proud of is my executive team that we worked with until the end of 2016. It was important to hire not only people with good hard skills, but also soft skills, and make sure that all key members of the team can not only deliver high quality games, but can also communicate, build company, build structure, talk to our clients, and so on.
So what are some of those? I mean, that's a very good point about the soft skills. Obviously, you're going to need people with experience in art or engineering or, whatever it goes into making the game. But what are some of those soft skills that, are vitally important to being successful as well?
Okay, so some of the skills that I already mentioned are the opportunity to give and receive feedback. It's very important to do it in the right way. Communication skills, opportunity to deliver your thought, deliver your vision to the team, and convince the team that this is the right thing to do. And so what else? Of course, I wouldn't mention some skills like time management and so on, because it's vital for everyone and for every industry. However, it's quite important for game development, because there are a lot of artistic people, and not all of them work with deadlines and not under pressure. So it's really important for people to learn how to organize the work, how to make everything time, and probably for the best, for me the most important skill is teamwork, the ability to work in team, and willingness to cooperate with the team. I've known a lot of amazing developers and artists who are great professionals but very bad team players, and neither of them succeeded to the extent that the people had good team player skills.
That's why we start companies instead of working within them, because, I'm not always the best team player. So let's switch gears just a little bit, and we'll get into something that you and I talked about that, you asked if we want to get into it. Given the world's political climate right now, you in particular, and I know plenty of others, you're having to switch up and change your conference strategy basically because you can't get a visa to come into the U.S.
Yeah.
So
this is what unfortunately happened. Yeah. Yes. So you want me to tell the story, right?
Well, and how it has affected, more so the changes and the pivots that you've had to make to continue to grow the company when you basically get cut off from some of these markets.
Yeah. Okay. So the story is the following. I had my US visa. I got my US visa in 2013. It was a 5-year long, it was a visa for 5 years, 5 years long visa. And I traveled to GDC every year since then, and I traveled to the other US conferences, and I came back and forth, never violated any, never overstayed or something. And yes, so for me, when I applied for the new visa in the beginning of 2018, it was quite obvious that I was going to get it. I even didn't have the possibility in mind that something might. And I already booked my tickets because I was so confident. I've been there, I came back, and it's obvious that I'm going to the conference. I'm working in the games industry, but unfortunately, when they asked me, when they actually asked me to come to the interview, it actually took quite a rough angle. At some point I realized that they asked me to show up only because they wanted to reject it from the very beginning. Because the points that the visa officer was making were ridiculous. They somehow accused me of having a child in the US or something like that, but I don't have any kids, and it's just ridiculous. And when I was making clear points, he said, "Okay, I don't believe." So it's very hard to argue with someone who just says, "I don't believe you," and that's it. And you just don't know how to prove that you haven't worked for your American company, you haven't had a kid in the US. Yeah. After that, I applied again, and I got another rejection. Then I consulted with visa consultants, and they said that it was a common thing for Ukrainians back then, especially if I a woman, unfortunately, and if I don't have family here, so they consider me as a very dangerous person for the US, and who can stay there and so on. And actually the fact that I am a founder of my own business doesn't help at all, because they know that there is no boss for me who can fire me if I don't get back. The situation is quite, I don't even know how to say it. I mean, I understand that the US is has a system. This is a country where there is a system, but in my mind, if you play by rules, systems protect you, not punish you. And if you play by rules and system punishes you, that it means that there is probably something wrong with it. But this happened, and I wasn't able to get to the US since 2017, so I had to skip GDCs and all the other events in the US. Luckily, I have a Canadian visa and go there, so at least I can meet some of the North American game developers in Canada. And it's good for me that I already haven't worked with these publishers and investors from the US, so we can set up calls before or after this. And when everybody else at GDC, I set up calls after GDC. And yeah, at the moment I have a team. When I started the Achievers Hub, it was just me, and of course if I couldn't go somewhere, nobody else could represent Achievers. But now I have 3 more team members. So hopefully, if I won't be able to get another US visa, maybe someone from my will be able to get a visa. For example, my business partner, he is a male and he has a wife and kids in Ukraine, so it probably should help. But anyway, it's not fair. It's not how it should work.
It's absolutely, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, because no, we're on the same level, but I mean, as a CEO myself, there are situations where they're like, well, prove your employment with a paycheck. And I'm like, I'm the one that writes the paychecks. How is that going to affect any, that's not going to help any of us. And so, so what, like you said, you've got other team members who may be able to get a visa to come into the U.S., but, if this keeps up, we're quickly approaching a point where not only in this industry, but for a lot of industries, we're basically sectioning off the country. So, you're going to end up working with more European or Canadian or South American developers and publishers than you are for the U.S. because, they think you're coming here to find a baby that you left that you don't have.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let's hope it changes. Yeah, but I think that maybe it would make sense if there would be some possibilities to influence the situation from the games industry side. When I was at GDC in 2016, probably I was in a panel, One Reason to Be, moderated by Rami Ismail. There were different people from different countries, and we were talking about how to make games in third world countries. And I think that some of them definitely mentioned visa problems. I didn't have it back then. Some of them, they had to apply for 3 or 4 times before they actually got approved. And these people, they didn't stay in the US. But it's almost impossible to prove that you're not intending to immigrate. So maybe we should do something from the industry side.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that we're doing with, there's more conferences. I mean, God knows. I mean, if you have the travel budget, you can go to a different game conference every week all year long. There's a ton of conferences out there. But one of the reasons that Rami went and did the big game dev global conference that was online that he did was because one of the women that was supposed to be on that panel, on the One Reason Why panel, couldn't attend because she was from the Middle East and she got her visa denied. And so it was like, this is exactly the point. We can't, as a community, continue to share knowledge and, network and do all this stuff effectively if we have asinine barriers in the way like we do. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons that we do our online event as well. Yeah. It's it's crazy. So if you're out there, we've still got about 10, 15 minutes. If you've got questions about biz dev, marketing, networking, any of that as an indie dev, toss them up in chat wherever you're watching us, and we'll see it on our little chat screen, and we'll pass it along to Elena. So one of the cool things that you're doing at Achievers Hub is your mentor system, where developers have access to 20 or 30 different experts in different areas. How has that worked out, and what are some of the success stories that have come out of the hub or that mentor philosophy so far?
Okay, well, this funny thing is that in the beginning, when I started Hub, I had in mind that primary goal would be to connect developers with publishers and investors, help them pitch the games, help them build the presentations, and mentorship appeared as something like secondary, something that would help these developers make the games better. Then after 2 years of Achievers Hub existence, I realized that, and this is what developers say to me, that mentorship is actually the main part. Because most of them, they don't even have a viable product. If they wouldn't have a viable product to pitch to investors and public if mentors didn't help them. And we have more than 100 mentors, but of course, not all of them. Team. Some of them work with only one team at a time. Some of them work with 2-3 teams. It always depends on the mentor's workload, because all of them, they have a primary job, of course. Some of them represent publishers, and so for them it's a great opportunity to find talents early and to get involved in the project on the early stages and to make more informed decisions whether to invest in this game or not. Some of these mentors, they are founded indie game companies themselves, but they already became successful and they want to share, they want to give back to the community and to give feedback to the developer. And it happened that developers who applied to Achievers have changed project quite a lot after working with mentors. Some of them, they had a great idea, not only a play version, but they didn't know, they had different ideas in mind on what they're going to make of this game. For example, one team, they made the casual project, but they thought of maybe making it more move into hyper casual direction or move to more like hardcore and play mechanics. So they talked to several mentors, and actually mentors have different opinions, and it's all, but they gathered feedback, they analyzed it, and they decided to make a hyper casual game, and there were negotiations with publishers. So hopefully it's gonna be out soon. Yeah, and yes, so like mentorship is the thing that our developers usually name first when somebody asks them about Achievers. We had a feedback form for developers, and we asked them to say like what is the most useful for you, or also Achievers Hub in a few words. And some of them mentioned publishers, some don't. Some of them mentioned events and webinars, some don't, but every team mentioned mentorship and how beneficial it was. It was an experience. It was not a primary thing that I wanted Achievers Hub to be, but yeah, it is like a making between developers and mentors in a way.
And it is, if you talk to 2 or 3 or a dozen of mentors, experts, so to speak, like us, you're going to get a whole lot of different opinions on, a variety of things. But it's important to developers to get that feedback early on, because many times I see developers and they're so secretive and they don't want to tell anyone about what they're doing because it might, somebody might steal the idea. The first thing you have to keep in mind is ideas are cheap. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Everybody has game ideas. It's a matter of how you execute on it. Yeah. And so it's good to go ahead and get that feedback from folks who have been in the industry, and that way you can learn from not only what they did right, but also learn from what they did wrong, because the good mentors are going to be the ones that said, look, I did something ssimilar and it went horribly bad, and this is why, and this is what I would do to avoid it. And so I believe firmly that we need to have more of these mentor, opportunities available for developers. And it's something that I've wanted to do on the Discord for a long time, and it just hasn't got down to that list. So, it's absolutely wonderful that you've got this space for them to come in and say, hey, look, here's the questions that I have, or here's the project that I'm working on, and what do you think about it?
Yeah. But one more thing that I want to add about mentorship is that it's important to but developers should remember all the time that this is their project in the end, and decision is theirs. So they shouldn't they should listen to feedback, but shouldn't consider it as a plan to act. It's always developer decision bring this game, and of course, as I said, mentors might have different views depending on their background, but at the end it's important to know where you're heading to make out of the game. Have it in mind.
When we first did the big list of 500 some publishers that we put out there for free, I'll never forget, I posted it on Reddit, and somebody on there was pushing back on how you pitch to publishers. And I said, look, they said, what do you know? And I'm like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've pitched countless, different games, and this is what I've seen, and this is what you need to do. And they said, well, I think your advice is really bad, and I'm not going to listen to it. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to. That's your prerogative.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. Sometimes mentors, they just ask right questions. Sometimes they don't even tell what you do. They just ask the questions in the right way, so you understand yourself what you should do. Yeah. Sometimes it's just important to have someone who can listen to you and listen to your crazy idea, and then describing it, and then you have some new ideas in mind. And while you think about it, sometimes you already realize that it's not gonna work probably. So sometimes it's important just to at least have someone to listen to you, and someone to ask the right questions.
And it's not just for new companies either. It's like even I, bounce ideas off of people early on, and you can go on the podcast list. And we had a great interview with Adam Crichton, and the whole thing was about why it's important to have a mentor.
Yeah, I have a mentor myself.
We all should.
I love mentors. Yeah.
And the thing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who is your senior or who has been doing this longer than you have. It's like one of the the newer folks out there can sometimes be a great sounding board or a mentor, because they're approaching things differently, and it may not be the way that we've been doing it for 20 years. Maybe there's a new way. You're not going to know until you talk to some of these other people.
Yeah, maybe even from a different industry, to have a fresh new view. Yeah.
I'm one that's really bad about, I get really interested in different business models, even outside of our industry. And so I'll meet somebody who runs a certain company, and I'm asking them all kinds of random questions. It's like, well, how do you find an audience? How do you do social media? How do you do all this? Because I want to know, because there may be something that, they're doing that could work in our industry as well, but we hadn't thought of it yet.
We got another question. Another question from Facebook.
Yay!
Yay! From Taylor Moore. Taylor says, can you tell us what investors are looking for? And can you do that in 2 minutes? No. Yeah, do that in 2 minutes, please.
The investors are looking for great projects to invest in.
Right. They're looking for things that are entertaining, right?
Yeah, actually, I mean, that every investor is looking for something different, of course, but at the end of the day, they're just looking for something that would fit their portfolio and the great team they can work with. By the way, this is important. Not only concentrate on project, but also think about your team and your strengths as a team, and they're looking for passionate founders also with great talented teams who develop great projects. Yeah, that's it.
I feel like they also look for like companies that they can make the most amount of money in the easiest possible way, right? That's like the bottom line is money, right?
That's a crazy business model.
I mean, but that's really it, right?
It depends. Yeah. But also, like, the investors are also different. If you're talking about VCs or angels, yeah, might be slightly different. Seed investors or like later stage investors. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the bottom line is they're just looking for. There's another question. The bottom line is they're just looking for something that's going to make them money. If they look at something and say this isn't going to make them money, no matter how awesome the devs are or great the team, they're not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Now, okay, so another question from Taylor. At what state of development is it best to show an investor?
Okay, that's a good question. Again, it depends on the type of investor. As I said, some of them are seed investors and they're looking for project to invest early on. They would probably want to be involved like quite hands-on. If they're looking for early stage project, they would to somehow influence the way the way the game develops. Some investors are looking for later stages. No one is looking for super late stage, for example, like early access on Steam, when you cannot change anything. Most investors, they want to be able to at least provide some feedback that can be implemented. So again, it's important to know like who you pitch the game to. There are several investors in our network who only look at the early stage projects, and several investors who only look at the intermediate and later stage projects.
So it's really like know your audience. All right, we have one more question from Hitoshi Kano on YouTube. Should you include things like market research you've done for your genre to maybe convince them that this can make money?
Yeah, that's cool. If you've done it, you load it in a pitch deck. Of course, it can convince some. Let's say, especially if this investor is not. It sometimes happens that the investors is not from games industry. For example, it also can be that you attract money from other industries, and market research can really convince them. But even if the investor has their own research, the fact that you made the research, that you're aware of the position about the market is convincing itself. So it's really cool.
Oh, another question from Nightwolf. Here we go. Would it be easier or better to show off the demo of your game via a demo video or a YouTube streamer gameplay video?
I don't think it really matters. If you have both, it's cool, but I think it doesn't really matter if there is a streamer or it's just a record of a gameplay. The main when someone looks at gameplay video, they probably have one main question in mind, and this is how to play this game, and how fun is this game? Is it fun to play or not? So like both videos can answer this question. If your video is cool and it shows that you're fun, that you have a cool, engaging gameplay, it doesn't matter.
In many ways, if you have a streamer do it, and this is because I know, Andy, you've done some of these as well, you're showing the investor or the publisher two things. One, that there is an interest in this game from the influencer point of view, which is a huge part of marketing now. But two, you've got someone who is very well versed in how to keep an audience engaged and verbally speaking through, a lot of the things that you're thinking while you're playing the game. It's, I always recommend, if you've got access to especially, a more well-known influencer, get them to do it, because it can really drive the engagement. And when I first started doing this show, Indy was prepping me and giving me tips on streaming in general. And one of the first things he said was, you've got to make sure you're, saying something every 5 seconds or so, to keep the audience engaged. And when you're showing that demo to a publisher, it's great to have someone doing that, because one, they're not automatically assuming someone, the player knows what to do in the game, but you're also being able to show the internal, that first-time user experience from somebody fresh. If it's me, we always recommend that, get an influencer to do it. Even if it's not live, get an influencer to record it, because you're going to end up with a much more engaging video.
Or maybe you can just play it and comment somehow. I mean, the developer can do it to make it more engaging.
Yeah, we could do a whole new webinar on, how to make demos.
Yeah.
For the folks out there who are listening and aren't watching chat and everything else, that's one of the things I want to bring up is, it is very, when we're talking about investors and publishers anyway, it is very different when you're pitching to an investor versus pitching to a publisher. And if you go to powellgroupconsulting.com/webinars, we have 2 free webinars that we do, one for each route of how you pitch to publishers and how you pitch to investors. Those are completely free. You can register for them, and even if you can't show up live for them, they'll the system sends you the video the next day. So we recognize that it's not something everybody knows, and we try to get out there and do it as teach people as well. Elena, is there anything else that you want to cover? I know we're over our time, and I don't want to keep you, too occupied, especially since it's the end of your day.
Actually, there is one thing that came to my mind later. Discussed the ways how to get to the conference if the tickets are too expensive, and it reminded me of one situation in the past when I was at iLogos. Once I went to DICE in Vegas, and it's quite an expensive event. It's a very expensive event, and we didn't have enough budget to buy me a normal ticket, so the company bought me a party pass, the one that gave access only to parties. So it means I could go to parties and network, which is, by the way, also very important for networking, sometimes even better, because people are more just don't try to pitch something after midnight, especially if everybody is drunk. But anyway, so it means that during the day I had basically nothing to do, because I was not allowed to attend the sessions with my ticket type. But it happened in Delano Hotel, and that everything happened on the 6th or 7th floor, but many people had meetings on the ground floor in lobby bar and so on. So I just hang around. Sometimes I just talk to someone casually, and it was an informal meeting. And I realized that many people just go back and forth using the elevator. So I just started going also back and forth using the elevator, and I met some people in the elevator like, hey, oh, you're also here for this. Hey, me too. And I literally had elevator pitch every maybe 10 minutes. This is about using all the opportunities that you have. So if you cannot buy a ticket, there are many ways to get somehow close to publishers and investors and pitch your game to them, if you're creative enough.
I had a developer several years ask me, they were going to GDC for the first time, and they're like, well, we also need to be working on our games, so we're going to go to the conference during the day, and then we're going to work on the games during the evening. And I said, if you've got limited time, you're doing that backwards, because there's very little business that actually happens on the show floor at these conferences. It all happens at the parties and in the hotel lobbies and things like that. I said, save your money, don't get a pass, work on your game during the daytime, and then go out and network and talk to people, at the W or, whichever hotel you're at GDC. Go out and do that. Do your networking in the evening, because that's where everything happens anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for coming on. I highly appreciate it. If anyone wants to check out, so what's the website for Achievers Hub before I rattle it off and I'm wrong?
Achievers BIZ. So yeah,
you broke up.
We can post. We can post it somewhere, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we'll put it in the descriptions. Also, you guys join the Discord, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. We're almost up to 700, right?
Yeah, I can actually check while we're live and see where we're at here. But yeah, we've got 600 and some companies represented on the Discord, and it's a great place to talk to our guests that are on here and, ask questions in general, because we got everybody from developers to publishers to marketing firms, all kinds of folks on there. So yeah, check us out. If you're watching live, you can get the podcast at anchor.fm/indiegamebusiness, or you can like and follow any of our numerous streams on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Mixer. Just look for Indie Game Business and you'll find us.
Search and you will find us. Yes, thanks, Elena.
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me. Thank you for your questions.
Bye, everybody.
You are very welcome.
Bye. I'll see you at the industry event.
Yes, exactly.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.